Hey, Alex.
Yes, Sarah?
How can you tell that you have a really strong community?
I know that because I spend a lot of money on pizza, and I'm a little bit annoyed often.
Welcome to Mistakes Were Made, a podcast for messy people like us. I'm Sarah. I'm a queer, polyamorous therapist, writer, activist, parent. Thanks.
And I'm her co-host and husband, Alex. I say something different every time. And that's what I said this time.
And I'm Jessica here producing, and I should have made sure those intros were still in the script.
I think it was fun this way. Okay, before we get into the episode,
Yes.
we want to talk about our workshop.
Yeah.
We have a workshop. It's coming up on March 21st. And Alex, do you want to talk a little bit about what this workshop is? And
I mean, it's
why
like
people should
if
come?
you're just delving into polyamory, opening a relationship, maybe having some struggles around that. We are going to bring a small group of people together and do some hands-on activities to work through. I shouldn't have said hands-on.
Just disambiguate there. We mean hands-on in a metaphorical
Yes,
sense.
hands-on
workshops.
Feelings-on workshops
are different.
This is all legal, where we will discuss some of those challenges, some of the frequent things that come up early on in opening relationships, and based on some of our experiences, as well as Sarah's fantastic expertise as a very renowned relationship therapist. I'm sorry, that sounded sarcastic, but
it really did.
You know what? People
Very
are
renowned.
clamoring to get into Sarah's practice as clients. So this is a way to get a little taste of what Sarah has to offer in that realm as well. When you'd be on the wait list to see her as a regular client for quite some time.
Thanks for the plug.
Mm-hmm.
But seriously, I'm really excited about this. I think this is one of my favorite groups of people to work with. I have specialized in my practice in working with queer, polyamorous populations, and also especially with folks who are moving from monogamy to non-monogamy. So I'm really excited to be able to do that outside of the office and in a small group, sort of intimate setting. So I can't wait.
Here in Seattle.
Here in
is where it
Seattle.
is. So follow the link in our bio, etc., and you can sign up for that.
Okay, I can't wait to see you all there.
Okay, today our guest is Ramsey. Ramsey has been on the show before once, and then another time in our live episode. Ramsey is a Gemini with big Scorpio energy. And he's a polyamorous banker, Midwesterner. He's 30 years old. And he is a rugby professional? No?
Semi-professional?
I would say semi-pro, yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
The first division, but I don't get paid to play rugby. So
Okay, so you're
we were in the
advanced amateur.
Stranger. So
We're in The Stranger?
yeah, we
Really?
were in the little video. So it's on Instagram.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's going in the show notes.
Yeah. And we brought Ramsey on the show because he's a wonderful guest, but also because we realized it was Black History Month at the last minute, and you always like to come on and be our token Black guest, right?
Always happy to be the token Black
Love
person.
that. Ramsey loves that.
I love being the token Black guest.
It's so awesome. I also would like to mention that Ramsey is wearing double flannel today, which I really appreciate. And
It's not very black, but it's
but it's very Pacific Northwest.
very Pacific Northwest. I have to blend in a little bit sometimes.
Okay, so we're here to talk about community, right?
Yeah.
How did we land on this topic?
Ramsey suggested it.
How did we land on this topic, Ramsey?
I think that we landed on this topic because the last time we talked together was at a community event, and I recognized that there is a dire need for reintegration into communities because we kind of lost that along the way, I believe.
Yeah, it feels like everyone is talking about community right now, and that's like been building as a like part of the zeitgeist for a while, but especially in, what would you say, like the last few months, I think people have been
Yeah.
talking about it a lot. Why do you think that it's been more on people's minds in the last few months?
I think it's been on people's minds more recently because things have been more dangerous lately. And so when we are feeling scared and alone, we need to like reach out to community for support. So that's why there's been more like rapid response teams and things like that, where people are able to coordinate with their community and local organizers so they're able to be connected.
Yeah. And we saw the strength of community and the sort of like natural gravity of community in emergency in Minneapolis. And I think it was really inspiring to people. I know it was inspiring to me.
Yeah.
And just this reminder that you are in community. It's just like, how are you engaging that community? What does it feel like? How do you think of yourself as a member of that community?
I think that what I was originally struggling with when I first was stressed out about life and like living in Seattle, because Seattle's very isolating.
How many years have you been in Seattle?
I've been in Seattle for 3 years and then Washington for 10 years. So I felt like the world is ending and I feel alone. And I was like, I do have a lot of people in my community who I can reach out to. But what I remembered was that the way that we've survived previously was just organizing at churches and like meeting with people and just being around each other, because you're not supposed to think about it all by yourself. And that's why other organizations have been like able to be so powerful, is because it's such a strong community. Even like, I hate the Make America Great Again, but they are a very like quote unquote welcoming community to their own people. So even if you make mistakes, they're still supporting you through those mistakes, through those things. And there's like this level of like vehement welcoming for pedophiles.
Aggressive welcoming for shitty people.
You could be an absolute piece of shit.
Yeah,
and
but you
it's-
can be, you're our piece of shit, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what happens
Yeah.
is like we lose so much because it's just like, hey man, you called me the N-word. I don't want to be like around you. But then I'm just going to stop hanging out in this whole like area, and then I'm no longer welcome. And we just keep creating this distance where you're not around any more Black people. And then it's like, we're separate.
So you feel like there's a connection here. And what can we learn from MAGA? No, I'm not. No.
No, it doesn't.
But where did we lose community along the way? As you were talking, I was like, okay, cancel culture is a part of this, 100%, and we got to talk about it. I think you mentioned churches. So the kind of like original structure for organizing community for a lot of people who have like left the church is no longer there, right? And the church has become sus in a lot of ways.
Right.
And then I was going to mention COVID.
Yeah.
Like we got a bomb just like blew up community for about 5 years in there.
Yeah.
Are there other ways that it feels like we've lost our connection to community that need to be kind of on the list here?
Well, I feel like just like the like transitory nature of modern life or whatever, like sort of the expectation for people of our generation or your generation, Ramsey, is that you would have moved, right? Like that kind of like you're maybe like kind of an unrealized person if you didn't like leave the place you were from for like work or for a relationship or whatever and like move to some other, you know, important city. Like there's always that narrative that like people from small towns like want to get out of the small town and move to the city, and people from one city should like move to another city.
Well, and there's
I think
an
that hurts a
economic
lot, too.
imperative too.
Right.
For a lot of people, coastal cities were the places that had the best paying jobs or were, you know, job growth in general.
And then like in the corporate world too, they're like trying to make you move, you know, like we have a friend who was just like had to leave his job because his job was like, you have to move to Las Vegas. And then 6 months after that, you have to move to New York or something like that. If you want to keep, it's just like,
I think also social media, the way that we used to organize using social media, like Twitter was a spot where everybody could kind of like announce what was happening, and you could kind of trust roughly the sources and use that as a way to like quickly get information and organize. And then as things started to happen on Twitter where they're platforming more like right wing extremists, it became harder for people to like trust that information. And then we had a president who also said don't trust the news, and so it became harder for people to just even understand what's actually happening in the world.
Yeah. So
you're saying that like led to people being more kind of isolated from each other? Or?
Yeah, because they won't feel like there's a problem. They just know that they're feeling isolated.
and they don't trust each other. I mean, I
Right.
think like that
Yeah.
kind of
Mhm.
breakdown in being able to trust information, people's perspectives and points of view, they're not being like online or information gathering spaces that feel trustworthy are
Yeah.
further isolating as well.
Yeah. So that's like a lot of kind of diverse reasons for like a community crisis. Yeah.
I feel like I want to mention some more.
Okay.
Or is it too
Go ahead.
early?
No.
Is it
Say
too
more.
early to
Say
mention
more.
It's
more
never
problems?
too early.
I mean, you mentioned capitalism, economic imperatives. There was also like our friend Alex Garland recently did a piece about like millennial experience of the economy and how for them the economic downturn in 2008 just like created this kind of desperation among young people where they really did have to chase jobs wherever they might go, and it's been harder to like build community in one place. But I think like, I know this sounds big scoped, but I do think like white supremacist culture and like settler colonialism has created the conditions. These are like contemporary conditions of being hyper individualistic, of being really competitive in a way that doesn't foster community, of like losing collectivist values, which all groups of people came from somewhere, right? So I think there's like a deep cultural issue in the United States and political issue in the United States around that too.
Yeah. And I think that also with white supremacy, the church, like a lot of black churches, switched from using that as a spot to organize to becoming more focused on capitalism. And like these big mega box churches were like, it used to be a place where everyone could kind of like safely connect. And then it wasn't always very accepting, but like there used to be a way for a lot of families to organize and support each other. And now it's just extremist where, not always, but like they have to adhere to the Christian values. And then if the whole United States is becoming a more Christian country, it's not accepting for anything. And so there's no more activism with the churches.
So like rather than the church being like sort of a community center first that has like a religious overlay, it's like the religious values are like a really strong in-grouping, out-grouping like force. Yeah.
Because it used to be like an activist spot, and now it's no longer like that. I think there's so much more focus on generating wealth and creating these big, rich organizations as opposed to really helping the community the same way that it used to be.
We were talking about that earlier too, because I think a lot of people who are sort of like looking for community, and maybe especially in like poly circles, are from religious backgrounds. And it was dawning on me that like, you know, if you came from a background like that, you might kind of feel like, okay, it was like toxic and I needed to leave, but it did have this like foundation of community that was there. But then it dawned on me like, you're also paying for that, or like your parents were paying for that, right? Like people give a lot of money to their church, and like the idea that we would just like generate something that was sort of like a replacement for that level of community is like, you know, there was financial stuff going on behind the scenes that were like making all of that work, right? Like people are supposed to give like 10% of their money
tithing
to the church that they're a part of, right?
But it makes sense because it's like your investment into that community.
Sure.
And it's a way that like we already pay taxes on like everything just to live. So like we are used to having to pay. But I feel like, especially with our communities here, there's not any other places that I can think of off the top of my head that are as welcoming as a church is like generally known to be. Like where else can you go that you would just be accepted regardless of things?
And there's also that sense of just a lack of third places in the world. If you're not at work and you're not at home, where else can you actually be where you're not required to spend money? And church, you know, basically, or religious institutions were that third place. All right, so that's a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And we're going to overcome all of them today, which actually we already did, Alex, because it's just buy people pizza, right?
Yes.
As you mentioned.
That helps. Yeah.
But what does this have to do with polyamory? You kind of hinted at it. Why are we talking about it on a poly podcast?
Yeah. Well, I guess the backdrop to that is kind of like uh, just the idea that community comes up a lot in, I think, in poly spaces, and people talk about like the poly community, but it's like sometimes people are like trying to use polyamory and non-monogamy or like dating in general to like bridge some sort of gap and to like get to a place of community. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about today was just like, does that work? Is that a good idea? Have you guys heard people, I guess to start with, is that premise? Like, have you guys kind of heard people
I think
referencing that?
It's a great way to get a community. When I first moved to Seattle, I didn't know anybody, and I just went on lots of dates and kept meeting people and didn't have an attachment to how anything like happened from the dates, but I would just be focused on creating a relationship or like a friendship. And then I generated just a lot of connections and made a pretty big community for myself that way. But I will say that it really depends on the intention that you're setting with the dating, because there's so many different layers that go into relationships. You really want to set those expectations up front.
What do you mean?
Tell me more, Ramsey.
I think that like you go into relationships with a certain level of like interest in a future or the way that that relationship will look. And I tend to be extremely resistant to any of those things. And so I will just be like, I am extremely busy. If you make time for me, I will make time for you. But like, I don't have an attachment to how this is going to go. I'm just attached to like spending time together and getting to know you.
Like you're not into escalators.
Not into escalators. I don't believe in escalating. I believe in stairs, taking intentional steps up. But I'm not wanting to do it that way, just with the escalator elevator.
I hadn't heard that before. I like that metaphor.
Do you identify as a relationship anarchist?
Yes.
Why did you make that face when you said that?
Because I feel like the definition is different for everybody, and it's always dependent on both where you're at that current time that you're being asked and where you're at with your relationships. And so I feel like I do identify as a relationship anarchist, but I'm also in like 2 relationships where I've been very different from how I normally was.
So you're like, I'm a relationship anarchist, but don't tell my girlfriend that.
No, they know that I'm a relationship anarchist. I think it's just I'm recognizing that I've been losing a little bit of my normal self in managing my 2 relationships and not been as focused on my relationship with myself.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How does that relate to relationship anarchy?
Because relationship anarchy to me is not related. It's about you being not attached to how any of the relationship works, and you can kind of like pick and choose how you want to build the relationship together. And so if you don't have a good sense of like how you are for yourself and your relationship with yourself, it's hard to be in a successful relationship with anyone else.
I'm digging into this relationship anarchy piece a little bit for 2 reasons. One, because I just wrote something about calling myself an anarchist and what it means and the baggage that comes with it. So I'm kind of curious about that word and how people relate to it.
Yeah.
But also because I think relationship anarchy is a tool, an important tool in like the toolkit of building community. Like whether or not you call yourself that, and that was kind of what I was talking about. I'm like, I don't care if you call yourself an anarchist, but there are values inherent in this that are actually really helpful in building community and alternative community.
Right.
I think.
I would agree. I think that especially in relationship anarchy, there's a way that you can not be attached to how a relationship looks. And that's like essential for building community, because we have all these ways where we have a perspective. And just because somebody doesn't fit that initial perspective, we've gotten very used to like canceling people for cancel culture. And so like just because you shopped at Target or like bought something, like some people still eat at Chick-fil-A. I understand that like that's a bad thing, right? And I don't do it, but like I cannot tell people like, hey, you're a terrible person for doing that, because all it does is create this distance between us, and it's not an easy conversation, as opposed to being like, hey, I know that like you like to enjoy Chick-fil-A, but like they are not supportive of like gay rights.
And that, I think, is an anarchist value. So, and it's essential to the kind of community that we're talking about wanting to build, which is not hierarchical or exploitive or, demanding that you adhere to a power structure. It's not prescriptive. It's, I think for me, the definition of anarchism is that you are immensely responsible for yourself. And that like that's where it all starts. Is like, what are your values and how do you live them? And that is an autonomous expression and has nothing to do with how other people answer that question. And then learning how to be emotionally mature enough to all be in community together in a way that feels functional and generative and safe enough.
Yeah, I think that especially with relationship anarchy and being in a larger community and trying to organize that, that's where I've had more trouble in like with people who are leaders who are, there's always that inherent hierarchy because someone has to be someone else that they listen to. And so there's a way in which there has to be a role for someone to like take the mantle of like helping to organize, because a lot of times we want this like community, but it takes work and it takes effort and it takes someone to like really drive that force.
Someone's got to buy the pizza.
They have to buy the pizza. And like, I'm notoriously frustrated about the way that pizza parties work anyways, because it's a whole thing. Like, if you're going to have pizzas, you need to have it stacked by pizza and then
Absolutely.
two slices max per person until everyone's had some. But
So
like,
that is actually just a universal value.
it's universal value. But like, if you are at a pizza party and there's not enough pizza, then how would they feel welcome in the community?
Yeah.
And like, a lot of times that's what ends up happening is that we buy pizza for a large group, but we aren't prepared for the amount of work that actually goes into organizing. And so people are going to go in thinking that they're getting a safe space or like something to be nourished, and they're going to feel empty. They went hungry and they are staying hungry.
You're saying people aren't buying enough pizza.
There's not buying enough pizza.
Yeah.
I feel like pizza is a metaphor here.
It's interesting also, like you have you're saying 2 slices per person, but that's like a self-regulating, like for an anarchist principle, we would all just like kind of know that almost intuitively maybe and be like, yes, sir.
Well, actually,
You're like, actually, I need more pizza. I have a unique individual need.
Again, I think this does come back to how we build community, because I think another anarchist principle that I follow is the idea that we push resources towards the people who need them most, right? So it's not actually that everybody gets 2 pieces of pizza. It's like, who's most hungry? Let's start there, you know?
Like me and Ramsey need 4 because we're both like over 6.
I'm going to need an entire pizza to myself.
I mean, but like, that's different, right? Like, I would need more pizza for myself personally, but I'm aware that like, I would rather have a little bit less pizza and more people than more pizza and less people.
Because there's also this recognition that we're only as like healthy, safe, and well as the collective is.
Right.
And so taking care of the collective is taking care of ourselves. And also taking care of ourselves can be taking care of the collective. But we have to see those things as in conversation. We've gotten very abstract very fast, and I love it. But
let's keep talking about pizza as much as we can. But I wanted to jump back to like, because one of the questions I had coming in was like, are romantic relationships sort of like inherently at odds with community? Because we were like thinking about this, like, you know, dating as a pathway. And I think you kind of addressed it with the relationship anarchy idea that like, because the reason that I think they might be at odds, or the reason that occurred to me, is that like romantic relationships sort of ask for like special attention that is perhaps like, you know, I want you to give me as your romantic partner like special attention. And that means like, what makes it special is that you don't give that attention to other people.
I think it depends on the relationships. I think that especially with romantic relationships, even in monogamy, there's a way that when people are dating and they get married, they join the families, and then those people get divorced, the families are still joined. And then if they get remarried to other people, those are just a larger family, right? So there's a way in which, like, even in monogamy, there's this community aspect where you're still getting all together in community and organizing. So it's like, it depends on the way that the relationship works and how terrible that
how
marriage
the divorces
was.
Go.
But
and also the intention that you're bringing to it.
Right.
I think that a lot of romantic assumptions that people make about romantic connection is that they are entirely built on one-on-one private time between the two people. But I would kind of call that into question. And I think for me, obviously that is a feature of romantic connection, or a sexual connection, but also seeing people in context, getting to know their community, them getting to know my community, being able to like do things and build things together are deeply romantic things for me. And that makes me sound like a nerd, but it's true.
I think that, yeah, building things within your interests and hobbies are also another like great way to build community. I worry that what happens, especially in polyamory, is that people will have hobbies and meet a partner at the hobby. And then when they have that like breakup or rupture, there's this disconnect where they don't feel welcome in their own space because that relationship is tied to the hobby.
That brings up such a great point about the challenges of community. And I think one of the reasons why people will shy away from it sometimes is because they've had bad experiences with like community being dependent on a partner, for example, that relationship ending and then feeling like really abandoned. And not just the grief of the end of that relationship, but of a family, or of an entire community, or of, you know, a beloved pastime or sport or, you know, hobby.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced it like dictating my like decisions or feelings around breakups, like with some people where I don't have any community integration at all or like no other people in common. It's like a lot easier to be like, okay, I'm going to walk away from this thing. Whereas if you do, then it's like there's all these other people that we have in common that we have to like manage, and we're going to like be in the same space together in the future. So we have to, you know, or decide that we're not going to do that, but that means abandoning
Your
community ties that you have. Yeah.
And that navigating of conflict, of rupture, of changing relationships and the end of relationships, I think these are all skills that we really need for community, but we don't always develop them with that context in mind. Does that make sense? Like, I'm curious for your reflections on how the poly community maybe will have some emphasis on having good skills around conflict, rupture, and ending relationships when it comes to romantic.
What I've seen in the poly community is that like when there is a breakup, some depending on how the breakup is and the reasons, a lot of times they're able to still be in the space. But I recognize that there's this way in which there's still a distance created between like that person and whoever was like closer to the original like person who got, you know, broken up with. And so there's a way in which we still kind of pick sides. And then in those picking sides, it can still create like a feeling of isolation because they're not going to feel as welcome to go back to that community or their friends, because it's not like their relationship is tied to the partnership that they had and not to the actual people.
Yeah. It's really, I think it's really challenging too, because even under the best of circumstances, most breakups and relationship endings require space for people to like heal and reconnect with themselves outside of that relationship and then be able to come back to a context or a community. And that can be hard. Especially
if both people are in like the same community together and both need people and support in that same community. And especially when in Seattle, there's a lot of transplants who are here. And so if they have like a large friend group and all of their partners are all together and they make a lot of friends and then they break up, like how is that community supposed to support both people?
Yeah. Yeah. And the capacity of a community.
Can we come back to just the like term in general?
Yeah.
Because I feel like one of the things that like I bet you in sort of cultures or societies or moments where community was stronger, they weren't talking about community all the fucking time. And like I feel like the prevalence of that word like right now and like recently is actually an indication of like the lack of it. And people like gesture towards it, but they don't like really necessarily know exactly what they even mean.
Yeah.
It's like it is a very like ethereal term that when I like looked it up in the like Webster's dictionary definition, it like means sort of refers to both like the actual like group of people, like a group of people living in the same place or having particular characteristics in common. And then it's also like the feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. So those are like pretty straightforward definitions, but like that feeling, like I could be like, Ramsey, we're in community together.
Right.
And you could be like, no, we're not. Like you and I could be in the exact same like sort of situation that we share, and one
Mhm.
of us could like have that feeling and the other of us couldn't, right? It doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah, what I heard when you were talking about that was like I was thinking about all of the different types of community that's always been part of it, because it was originally just a way for us to all be connected to each other, but there's been this like consistent fracturing of people to the point where we're always feeling kind of separate and having to like delegate each other to different things, like even all the way back, before the Roman Empire. We were talking about like everybody was delegated basically based off of their country and like whichever region or local place that they're in, and then that was who they raised and like who they fought for, and the wars and the lords and all of that stuff. And so like bringing it now, I don't know, I went to Roman, but
Yeah. Didn't you just say earlier history isn't real?
it's not real, it's fake. But
Bring back feudal times.
exactly. And I mean, history's doomed to repeat itself, right? So like at some point some shit's gonna happen, but like we now are in this way where there's so many ways that we have identities, and we aren't able to kind of like separate our own identity from the larger community, because that's not what capitalism wants. It wants us to be separate and a like a consumer, because that's the biggest community that everybody's a part of, is a consumer.
It's interesting, as I was listening to the two of you, I realized what people are saying when they say there's a crisis in community, I want community, where is community, how do you build community? I actually just hear them saying, I feel lonely and insecure. Because if we were trying to back engineer what is community,
Yeah.
I mean, community is a way that you feel safer because you are connected to people who are accountable to you and who you are accountable to, right? So if something happened, you lost your job, you got sick, you went through a crisis, there were hard times, it wasn't you alone facing them, right? And that you knew that you would do that for others and others would do that for you. So that's just a sense of like more security in the world and in uncertain times. And then I think like that loneliness that a lot of people and isolation that people are expressing to your point about capitalism is just this idea that like you are kind of just a unit for exploitation. You're just like, you exist here to work, make money, spend money, right? But you're kind of disconnected from meaning beyond that. That's your entire value in this system. And community, annoying as it is, different feelings that we may all have about pizza and how it is distributed. Community gives you a sense that you are valuable for another reason, right? Not just because you have some like extractive purpose, but because you are needed in a larger web of people.
Well, and then by being needed, you're also worth the work, right? And I think that's the thing that comes up a lot. Like you were talking about, like cancel culture, and this probably applies to breakups too.
Yeah.
Like when, like maybe a definition of community is like a group of people where some hard shit happens and they're invested in navigating that with each other, right? Like if you eat too much of the pizza and break our like sort of community standards, like are we gonna just ostracize you and be like, oh, Ramsey always too much he eats all the pepperoni, he's out of here, or are we gonna like work to heal that together?
Yeah. And I think that what's happened is that we've lost track of the fact that we have always been experiencing collective trauma together, like 9/11, never forget. And the
I don't think 9/11 has ever come up on this podcast.
I'm so excited.
Clearly we had forgotten
Everybody's
until
forgotten.
you came.
I'm so excited to be able to talk about it.
Sorry that I'm laughing so hard.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Continue, Ramsey.
But like
Collective trauma, yes.
collective trauma where we experience something and then we have to go figure out how to process that alone
Yes.
or in a different way. And so like if I go outside and I'm just like, hey man, shit sucks right now, like gas is too expensive, most people are gonna be like, yeah, gas is too expensive. And then I already have like a friend that I could talk to, and like, this is gas expensive guy. And like that's something that we don't do as much anymore. Now it's just like that guy is on drugs and I'm scared.
Yeah, we're scared of each other.
We're scared of each other, but we're not talking to each other about just like the things that we already have in common as just existing in a capitalist hellhole.
Yeah. It comes back to these anarchist values that we were talking about before, because another one that's important to me is that I'm going to lay this out here and y'all tell me if you agree with me. I want to be more inclined to trust any old neighbor walking down the street than I am an authority figure because they said that they were in a position where I should trust them. So more than a cop, for example, or I really hate the cops, or a cop.
Okay.
But the point being, like, if I were in trouble, I want to live a life where I ask my neighbor for help before I call the fucking police.
Right.
And so I think like that speaks to your idea of being afraid of each other, that we have been like sort of trained to think that we are in competition with each other, that we are threats to each other, and that we need these like mediators,
Right.
powerful mediators to come in and help us, but they are incredibly untrustworthy.
They are. And speaking of untrustworthy, I'll bring it back to polyamory in the sense that like a lot of times when people go out to date, they're dating for like relationships as opposed to looking for friendships. And so a lot of times it's harder for people to actually like focus on creating a friendship because their partners are worried about like what is the dynamic doing to the relationship. And so you're working on those skills of managing multiple like romantic relationships, but not romantic like just friendships.
Right.
And so they lose that aspect of keeping friendship important and keeping the community as like an aspect, because it's just now I don't have a lot of friends. I have my polycule.
Can you talk about how that worked for you? Because it sounds like that's kind of what you did intentionally or not. Like when you moved to Seattle is like, I'm going to meet people through dating, like through dating apps, right? Like, do you feel like that has like played out the way that you wanted it to, or are you happy with kind of like how that
I think
landed?
dating apps was very much like a part of it. I would say like 10%, similar to tithing. I was just always looking for any sort of like connection in any way, right? So I would just take same way as like if you're playing the lottery or bingo, I would just look at anything that like came up. So if somebody was just even like remotely friendly, I would just instantly start a conversation and like try to pursue any sort of like interest or connection as a way of creating like more community. And so then I just kept meeting people regardless of whatever we had in common.
Yeah.
And it was a good way for me to feel like I got more connected to Seattle. And so I feel like I have a lot more people that I know. Even like when I go places, I sometimes forget how many people I've just met through other things. Like I've gone on a date and then like they invited me to a party and then I meet like a bunch of people at that party that aren't even necessarily poly, but like they're still just friends that I know and can like talk to.
That's what you meant by the 10% part. Like maybe it's the entry point, but then there's another 90% that it kind of like fades out.
So just going to random events and things that I like to do. So
it's also interesting. I mean, I don't know that this is problematic, but it is worth saying that I do think polyamory, we don't know if we're going to keep this title, but it says that the title of this episode right now is Fucking Our Way into Community. Is that right?
Who wrote that?
I don't know. But I do think sometimes we like, okay, we met on a dating app, so we're going to try and make this a romantic or a sexual connection. And then it's like, okay, this isn't really working. Let's transition this to friendship or in community. And then I'll almost forget that that's where it started. Because
do you feel like that happens a lot? Like, because
the show last week a couple of days ago, I kept being asked like, oh, how do you know this person? How do you know this person? And then I was like, oh, no. Oh, Alex dated them. Oh, Alex dated them. Oh, I went on a date with them, you know? But it was so long ago. And that's like such not the reason we know each other anymore that I had kind of forgotten that was the case.
And I think that when people like, ask, how do you know that person? They're trying to figure out like, how did you become into community with them? And like, to me, I'm always like, what matters is like what this relationship is now.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, where'd you get the shirt from a store? Like, who cares? Like,
see, Scorpio. This is some Scorpio shit right here. Don't ask me
Don't
questions
ask me
about
questions.
myself, but if you have information about me, you better remember it.
it's got to be correct, you know?
It better be right.
I've never been called Scorpio this much.
When you were dating people like that, I feel like didn't one time you tell me that you went on like 30 dates a month?
Yeah.
Is there a period where, is that still true?
No, I've not been on dating apps since last May. And that's because I've been focusing on my relationships and not necessarily needing to. And it's not like I'm doing that as like a way to like prevent dating. It's more just like I don't need that exponential amount of energy that I put towards dating apps anymore.
You don't need more inputs or more people adding to the.
No.
Yeah. What percentage of those people, when you were doing that, did you feel like you went out with them and it did turn into like a romantic or sexual relationship?
Out of the 10% that I would meet people on dating apps, I would say also 10%. Like the amount of effort, like I put the lowest amount of stock on dating apps because it's the hardest way to meet people for me. One, I just can like create a good amount of intro, but your profile in thousands of different profiles, and it's hard to wade through all of those things.
I wasn't meaning to ask about that specifically as much as just like when you're out there meeting new people, like how much work is the like motivation for them or for you? The sort of like impetus of, or I guess specifically for them, because you've already kind of said what your motivation was the like interest in like romantic or sexual relationships. Because I feel like that a lot of people are extremely motivated by that. Like they will put that before
anything else.
Almost anything else.
Yeah. And I think that like, especially in polyamory, that's people's first motivation to even interact is like a romantic or sexual attraction. And it's a good base to like use that. But for me, if I knew that somebody that I was like attracted to like physically or like even emotionally, I would use that interest as a way to like drive towards friendship first, because then I can focus on building a relationship regardless of whatever happens. So that I'm not necessarily attached to a romantic relationship. I'm attached to like that relationship as like a friendship.
I love that.
That's great. I feel like you're very unique in this way. It's like interesting that we're talking about this.
But this is what you were making fun of me about last night.
How so?
You and Suze.
Which time?
Okay. You and Suze were making fun of me about like how I always sort of prioritize friendship first, and then I'll slowly be like, hey, I might have a crush on this person, but it's like 2 years in. I mean, that's a little bit ridiculous. And I do understand that I'm a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I think spiritually, I really agree with that. That there's something about the sturdy foundation of friendship and community that then makes it feel safer, deeper, and more meaningful to layer sexual romantic interests on top of that.
And I think the other approach, which I'm probably more guilty of or have taken more, is like, you know, buying into that like romantic or sexual drive impetus for a relationship is it is risky because like it makes the relationship you have with the person more tenuous. Like if that stuff, you know, it's like burning hotter, and so it's more likely to kind of like flame out. And it also asks you to prioritize that over a lot of like other.
I think that makes endings much more traumatic. And I, like, in a recent breakup, had that experience of it's just like it was a really self-referential relationship that moved quickly, didn't have a lot of community context, and when it ended, it felt like rupturous and kind of traumatic in this really specific way because it was just gone. Like there's nothing left once
I get that. Yeah.
that piece was over, and it almost felt like there's like a word I'm looking for. It almost felt like solipsistic, where I was like, did that happen?
Yeah.
You know, like it just felt like it happened in a vacuum, and it had all of these big emotional consequences for me, but it just evaporated.
Yeah, and then you think about all the times that you like deprioritized people who are still in your life in order to prioritize a person who's like in the rear view.
But that's how we're kind of taught to do relationships anyways, is that person is supposed to come first and you have to prioritize other things before like everything else. And I think especially when you're dating and trying to like foster that relationship, if you aren't necessarily creating a line for friendship, then that romantic relationship is harder to actually like even value because you can't tell what the interest and attraction is. Like you're working through all of your interests from a sexual and physical standpoint as opposed to just like wanting to be around that person.
It also just makes me think about how those values or that way that we're taught to do relationships is so in service of nuclear families and reproduction.
Very much so.
And if you're not trying to build a nuclear family, which I think is the antithesis of community, by the way. I think it's like anti-community nuclear families. Yes, I said that. And I stand by it. But also, if you're not trying to like reproduce with someone, all of that new relationship energy that can be really, really focused on physical attraction and chemistry is biologically just meant for you to like make a kid and then for both of you to hang around for 2 years.
Yeah.
You know? And you're like, well, so what happens when those 2 years are over and you didn't make a kid? Then what do you do?
Nothing.
Nothing.
You just have to suck.
Yeah.
Or what happens if you made a kid and you don't have any community to help you raise that kid?
Right.
Then you
Throw a tablet in front of them.
yeah. Well.
Yeah, well, okay.
All right.
You know what?
Yeah.
That sounds a little bit judgy, actually, and sometimes that is what
This
the
interview is
situation.
over.
But
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask what your hot takes about community within polyamory are.
Yeah. I mean, I think where I was going with mine are that just this idea that it's problematic to be like, I'm going to build community through polyamory, and that's like kind of a trap because of all the things that we've named.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that you have sort of convinced me in the way that you've been talking about it that like maybe it's not, which is like the question that I wanted to ask you to zero in on a little bit more is like, you're talking about prioritizing friendship in like a new relationship or like laying the grounds for friendship, whether or not like romantic or sexual chemistry is there. How do you like do that?
I would say the way that I've done it previously, it's a hard struggle because, you know, when you're attractive and you want to have sex, you just want to have sex. I will do my best to not have sex early on, as well as just like focus on the dates being things that I would talk to about my friends, or kind of communicating in the same way that I would treat like a friend, and focusing on getting to know them regardless of like my purpose of trying to be in a relationship with them, but more of like understanding just who they are as a person.
So being present without there being a goal that you have in mind.
Right.
Yeah.
I really like the identification that communicating with them in the same way you might communicate with a new friend is a powerful piece of advice that I want to linger on for a moment, because I have my version of what I think is kind of problematic about polyamory building community is sort of the opposite of what you're describing. I think sometimes people are pursuing romantic relationships or sexual relationships with me, but actually I get more of a sense that they're lonely, and what they want is a friend,
Right.
and what they want is community. And they're like, you highly value community and friendship. If I become your partner, I can have those things too. And I'm like, well, but actually, if you want to be friends or in community, there are like pathways to that too.
Right.
And
You're like, I just want to have sex, actually. Could we?
But like it is
sometimes, yeah.
a problem.
But it is a little bit of a problem. Like, I think sometimes people don't know, and I'm not trying to like put anybody on blast in a way that I wouldn't put myself on blast, but don't know what they're looking for, right? And so the default in polyamory is I'm looking for romance and I'm looking for sex.
Right.
And then you kind of like get your signals crossed and people's feelings can get hurt, and it feels really confusing because there's misalignment. And it's like, you want to come to this show that I'm going to. You want to come to this political meeting that I'm having, or if you want to build an individual friendship with me, we can maybe do that too, but that's going to be a lot longer timeline, you know? And so a little bit, I feel like people are like, well, if I'm trying to build a romantic connection with you, we'll start texting every day and sending each other voice memos and stuff. And I'm like, okay, but like if you actually want to be friends, like we got to take this, I mean, we got to take it slower if we're going to be romantic partners too, but there's like a little bit of a, I don't know.
Hurdle.
Yeah, what am I trying to say? Like,
I mean, what I've seen in a lot of polyamory communities and like areas is that people go into the community and they're so used to looking for romance, and that being like the way that they connect with people is that they try to date within the community immediately as opposed to being a part of the community.
yes, I think
So
that's what I'm saying.
once you start dating, then they don't need that community anymore. And they weren't there for like actually being a part of the community as much as they were just looking to get a relationship. And then they try to find all of the needs of a community from that relationship. And it just becomes this like cycle of looking for a community to date and then taking what you want and leaving, as opposed to being a part of the community and just going and being in support. Because if you go to spaces where there's community and help build and support it, there's going to be relationships that come because people appreciate being around you.
Yeah. And I think in a way, mine is just an inverse of what you described, which is sometimes I think people really want the community and they're just using the language of dating because that's what they know. And I'm like, it's okay if we don't date. We can just.
I want to add another layer that I think people's sometimes bring the expectation level of dating and romantic relationships to their desire for community. And because we're so like primed to be like, oh, I met this person, it like escalated, I got the validation that I wanted. And when I hear people lamenting like that they don't have community or they like want to be in community in some way, like I'm always like, the people that I'm in community with, I have known for like, it takes like 2 years to feel like you're in community with it. Like it doesn't happen fast.
Yeah.
And it takes, I think, some, maybe even like by nature, some of that like ebb and flow and like connection and disconnection and like, you know, like the people that
you have to have some tolerance for feeling a little bit rejected sometimes or for it not being as intense for a while and then floating back to intensity.
Like I would say like we're, not to keep bringing this up, but like we're in poly community together, kind of Ramsey. And like we like met at something, I can't even remember. At a party. And then we like hung out a time or two and then we like didn't talk to each other for a while. And then you came on the podcast and then we didn't talk to each other for a while. And like all of that is kind of what adds to the community feeling like Ramsey's going to be there.
Right.
But he's not always there.
I'm not. But I will say that like at the last, like even the last Valentine's Day party, when I saw that you guys were going, I was more inclined to go because I knew that I was like, if I wanted to
see us in our lingerie, obviously.
Yeah, of course I wanted to see you in the lingerie.
We all looked so good.
Everybody looked great.
Yeah, so good.
But I knew like I wanted to like reconnect and also do the podcast again because I felt like there's more to say, which there's always more to say. But I was like, to me, that's part of kind of the community, right? Is like knowing that you have something that you want to work with somebody on, and then like also pushing and like working that through because that's part of it is bringing somebody in and then helping to introduce them to the community and being that person to support them.
And like fostering it, like this idea that we're holding that relationship together. Yeah. You know?
So this is making me want to read the Bell Hooks definition of community from All About Love, which is not actually her. She's good at like getting definitions from other people. I should look up the full name, but it's somebody named Peck. And she said, he said, whoever this person is, said, the community is a coming together of a group of individuals who have learned how to communicate honestly with each other, whose relationships go deeper than their masks of composure, and who have developed some significant commitment to rejoice together, mourn together, and delight in each other, and make each other's conditions their own.
Yes, I love that.
That's beautiful.
It's like that's
make
a good
each other's
definition.
Conditions their own is just like fucking perfect.
And it talks about like there being hard stuff there. Yeah. Right.
You got to mourn together. That reminds me of, we talk about
honesty,
the romance myth a lot on here, and like Dean Spade's definition of the romance myth and how we are manipulated into expecting perfection from romance. And then when it fails to be perfect, bailing or feeling betrayed or hurting each other.
Right.
And I think that there's a romance myth connected to community too. So when we come back to the beginning of this episode, we were like, everyone's talking about community. Where is it? How can I find it? How do I build it? Community. And a little bit, I want to be like, it's right here, motherfuckers. It's right here. And it's not some mythical group of people that you have to find. And it's not going to be perfect. And it's not going to feel great all the time. And in fact, like the community that you're looking for, you may already be in the sense of your neighborhood, your work, your family, and it's about being intentional in the way that you show up to it and fostering it and holding it in the way that you described. And that you have to be ready for it to be hard. And I think that this like requires some discernment that's difficult. And from a therapeutic perspective, it's difficult because we live in a time where people have rightfully left toxic, harmful, abusive communities, religious communities, and families of origin. Right? That's a good thing. I'm glad people are doing that. But then it also kind of has created this precedent that relates back to cancel culture. And I think before this episode ends, we have to talk about that a little
Absolutely.
bit. Where it's like things get hard and I leave. I get hurt by someone and I leave. There is a rupture and I leave. And having some discernment.
Told to leave.
Or I'm told to leave. Having some discernment about when you stay, right? I don't want you to stay in an abusive situation, right? But if we want community, we have to have a higher tolerance for things being incredibly difficult and for being hurt and hurting others and staying through it. And for a lot of people, and I do think like there is a cultural and racial element to this, white people are not good at that. Like there is a perfectionism here and of like fragility around that experience that is detrimental to building community.
Yeah. I also was thinking, as you were saying that, about the people who, during this like past couple of tumultuous years, people who moved out of the country and people who are making that choice to like leave the United States or leave their home or go somewhere else to like be safer. And like, yes, that's something that like I very much considered doing, but then it's not a luxury that I have. And I also felt like I do want to be here in support of like the community because not everybody can leave. And I want to be here to help however I can.
Make our conditions your own. What is the definition?
That's what I was just going to say. Making each other's conditions
our own.
Our own. Yeah, and that speaks to like a material exchange too a little bit. Like she's not saying it explicitly necessarily, but it's like if we're in community getting together, then if you're struggling, then I'm struggling too, or I'm like there with you in that struggle, and that could be one related to like money, food, housing, like elemental things like that, or like more sort of political things.
And I think community is not a vanity project. I think it's not cool. No. I don't think it's like, it doesn't bolster your ego. You show up to a lot of things that are dorky.
Yeah. So that comes to like another one of the quotes that we had pulled from Gabriella Brown on their Relationship Futures Substack, where she's saying, there's a phrase that the cost of community is inconvenience, but we usually mean the inconvenience we tolerate. We rarely talk about the inconvenience that we are.
Which could go into cancel culture.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
I think that it's weird because like the way I want to say it is always, it feels very like right-wing coded, or I'm like, we're too sensitive. But I do think that there's this level of being overly sensitive, right? Like when you go outside and it's cold, you don't stop being outside because it's cold. It's an uncomfortable feeling, but you still have to be in that feeling. You don't get to cover it up. You have to be there and accept that your body's going to change temperature.
This is Rich coming from a guy wearing 2 fleeces today, but
well, but I mean, I'm excited about this idea because I don't think the problem is sensitivity. I think the problem is capacity. So we can be sensitive, but we also have to grow our capacity around the size of our sensitivity.
I would agree. Yeah, I agree. I think especially in a lot of the spaces, there's these ways in which like it doesn't take much to be removed from the community. And I think that like it depends on the, infraction. And sometimes there are people who aren't safe and should absolutely not be a part of the community. And I agree. But like there's a way in which we lose sight of how we hold each other and hold each other accountable. It doesn't make sense because somebody did something wrong to like just kick them out of the community, because it doesn't really do much for that person to be held accountable. They just are kind of out of that one community.
Then they're going to go to some other community and do the same thing if you don't work with them on.
And so there's this way where we have an accountability problem, and we're not really being taught on how to hold people accountable or even hold people accountable within the community. You can kind of be held accountable within that relationship because there's a consequence there, but not necessarily within the community, and there's no community healing.
I think that speaks to this idea of like the broader the community is and the more sort of complex the connections, the safer it is. So it made me think about challenges that we've had in our own community over the course of the past couple of years, where people have been in like mental health crisis or addiction crisis. And the way that that is manifesting can be like really rupturous, frightening, unsafe.
Yeah.
you can't expect people to just like keep showing up for that, and especially like the same people to keep showing up for that.
Right.
That's not sustainable, and then you're just creating more kind of traumatized people. I think that's when those concentric circles of care that we talk about on the show sometimes come into play. And it's like people who are less in the acute crisis come in to do some of the holding, right? Where there's less intensity or emotional reactivity in the relationship. So if we're talking about like a breakup gone bad, the repair and the holding doesn't have to happen between the two people involved in the breakup. The repair and the holding can happen like over here in these concentric circles where there's less reactivity, you know?
Yeah, I would agree. I think, especially with those concentric circles and being kind of like out and separate. Also, I wanted to go back to my point about sensitivity specifically. Mainly,
I'm feeling really sensitive about
you
this.
should. I only bring that up is because I think that progressives lose sight of what community is, at least like very white progressives who are kind of wanting to be as like correct as they can, because it's never going to be perfect or correct. And so like there's this way where like you can't get offended on my behalf, right? Like if somebody's being racist or does something problematic, you can't make a decision on behalf of the Black community and then like treat it as if like I'm wrong for not having that same opinion as you, for not being as upset as you are.
Did this happen?
It happens a lot where there's like an assumed like hurt on behalf of someone else, and then they are reacting, because that's what cancel culture is, right?
I see.
Like Robert Downey Jr. from Tropic Thunder did blackface, right? But he's a white actor playing blackface like in the movie, and it's been fine. Like I don't think the Black community has any issues with it. We all are fine with Robert Downey Jr. as a residency. Of course, I guess like but there wasn't any issues, right? Like that wasn't the problem, because it was part of the joke in the movie, and it was written around that, and it still was held. Like they called it out, and we were like, "Why are you doing black?" He's like, "I gotta do the role." And so like there's this way where like, as opposed to looking for how we can support each other more, they're looking for what are you doing wrong, and how are you not currently supporting each other.
I saw a thing the other day that was saying like that white people tend to stop at awareness and not proceed beyond awareness to like action and sacrifice.
Right.
I think that's very true. I sent you that meme.
I saw something.
So proud of you both for
Thank
doing.
you.
I had this original thought the other day.
Yeah, I mean, I think in that's about like curiosity as well, and holding discomfort and letting there be like nuance and differences of opinion and experiences inside a community, instead of like requiring this kind of conformity of thought. And also critiquing without self-critique. I always am suspicious of it. You know, like I that to me, this is just a personal philosophy where I'm just like, they say, you know, punch up. And I'm like, but also kind of punch yourself in the face first.
I mean, you gotta just do an uppercut.
Punch up in an uppercut, and then, you know.
Punch headbutt, you know.
But like self-critique is where it should start. And that's where I think a lot of cancel culture goes wrong and isn't improving the culture or the experience of everyone in it. Instead, it's just a competition around who's the most right.
Or the most aware.
Yeah.
And I think it's also interesting because like cancel culture has so much power, and it was like started as a good idea, as like not supporting things that are not okay, right? And just like trying to get something canceled, but nothing can actually be canceled. Like we still have it in our community, it's still existing. Right. And so like what happens is that we'll have this collective trying to like end something, and a separate community comes to support it.
That's what you're saying with like the MAGA,
right? Because it's just like
absorbing people.
Now that we have this cancel culture, we have like this separate pipeline
Right.
where people will actively try to
And if we like kept all of those people in our communities rather than ostracizing them, then
I mean, they'd
Trump
still,
never would have gotten elected. That's what you're saying.
everything's always connected. I think that he still would have gotten elected because his platform is community. And like Republicans are notoriously good at voting and then also disenfranchising everybody else. Like they've not been putting a lot of stuff towards moving things forward, but they put a lot of stuff towards community and organizing, and they started young and they started with as many things as possible with very small spots, just like constantly putting effort in to like building a network and community. And we have a lot of space like progressives where they're like marching and doing all these things as well, where we're like fighting these problems, but Democrats don't give a shit. They're like, we don't have a plan because our plan is to not be bad.
Well, and that's not having someone's back.
It's not.
And that's why we were so inspired by Minneapolis, because that is having someone's back. That's having skin in the fucking game. That's having stakes. That's making our destiny shared. What is the
Our condition, each other's conditions our own.
each other's conditions our own. That's actually showing up. It's not about being right, and it's about risking being wrong. And in fact, I think that willingness to risk being wrong in some ways is a great gift to community.
It is.
And it's the kind of vulnerability that we want to model to have relationships that can actually withstand the hardship, the grieving, the ruptures.
So were you good?
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say that like that's part of building community is like accepting that you are not going to always be right and making that effort to like, you can't just go and expect to always be welcomed in without like empty handed. Even if it's just like labor and support, you still need to put your own investment and show up as well. Because I think that's the other thing I've seen in a lot of spaces where people just kind of go expecting to get something without giving anything in return.
And how are you accountable to the collective conditions,
Right.
right? If there's not enough pizza, what did you do to make sure there was enough pizza, right? And what are you going to do next time?
But people don't really do that very much around material things, I don't think, or that's not usually the problem, right? It's not usually actually a pizza problem or like this person doesn't like contribute. I mean, I guess it could be with a like cleanup or thing, but it's usually, I think, more like emotional and relational stuff, right? The problems people have in community are about relationships and feelings.
Right.
Yeah.
And capacity to hold that nuance and complexity, to not be the one that gets reactive in the room,
And to like resolve conflict, right?
to resolve conflict, to stay when it's getting hard.
Yeah. I mean, we did last year around this time, we did that whole restorative justice, transformative justice training. And it was like interesting because I was struggling through the whole thing and just being like, all of these frameworks are good and will work, but they only work if everybody feels like they're like kind of a part of the same community and that they want to stay in it. Otherwise, like you can't hold somebody accountable if they're just going to leave. Like they're going to be like, you guys don't like me anymore. I don't want anything to do with this community because of the way that you're treating me, or like you're rejecting me, or perhaps the way that you're holding me accountable and I don't want to be held accountable. And then they just like, will just go away. So like, I feel like that's kind of the challenge, is like knowing where sort of the edges are, and if there are, and like actually having the fortitude to like keep people in.
Or just keep the porch light on.
Yeah. And I think that like especially with restorative justice, because I've been a circle keeper and did that in high school as well. It's not just about that one person being held accountable. It's somebody else to help support them in holding them accountable, because it's not about the accountability alone. It's about the relationships as well that you have to be used to like support that person in doing that.
And this goes back to the idea that sometimes the healing is not going to happen initially or ever between the two people where harm was caused. Right. In fact, that will be the impetus for healing to happen in other places with the proper support. And that's still generative and important. It's not as satisfying, and it requires, I think, emotional maturity to hold that outcome.
Yeah.
But that's often the best outcome.
It is.
I want to tie this all together with some like operational question, and to think about like a sort of, this is like a sort of hypothetical, but not really necessarily. Because I'm hoping that in a couple weeks we'll have a conversation with Cassandra from Pleasure Suite about consent, and like, sort of really immediate manifestation of like community in the poly world is like, like sex positive, like sex party, kink
Right.
communities, those kind of, and you're like somewhat involved in
Yeah.
some of those as well. So how does this like get
Somewhat.
Somewhat, yeah.
I don't know. I don't know the details of that, but you can tell us. But how, so I'm sure it comes up a fair amount that like somebody in those communities is identified as like a problem, like they're making somebody uncomfortable or they're like violating consent in some way, or something like that. Like, how do we like navigate that? Because I think what is often the case is like, it's just sort of like there are community standards or guidelines, and then we sort of like identify this person is violating them, or like they're like, we label them as like a predator or something like that, and then we're like, they're out.
Yeah, that one is harder to do in just like a smaller setting because there's a lot that goes into the needs of holding that space. Like especially in like the kink community that I was in, I was a part of the mediation team, and we had like an issue between leadership where we had to like have one of the other people in mediation team needed mediation with somebody else from leadership. And so like what we did was hold like a circle where we had like them both share like the stories that happened, like what that impact was for them. And like we both listened, and then we shared like what we could do to support and like what was needed. And they aren't always going to go like that smoothly or that way. And I don't always imagine that people are going to be able to be in the same room. But if we're just doing it with that person alone, there's a lot of exercises that we can do. But the main problem that I think is there has to be like a buy-in and need for that person to want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We can't force anybody to like want to change or want to work on like repairing that harm, but we can give them the framework and hold that space. But then on top of that, that's another extra layer of emotional labor that people are taking with not much in return to hold. And then you have to decide, like, do these people even have a good like responsibility to be even in the mediation team? Because like, who says that you know what you're talking about, and why should I even listen to you? So it's like you have to have these multiple layers of relationships to actually hold all of the different complexities that come up.
Right.
It makes me think of that idea of keeping the porch light on, because we have to embrace the imperfect. We have to embrace that there won't be closure in the ways that we want there to be, that like justice or being made whole or restoration is something that happens in a complex, long, confusing timeline that sometimes we don't even understand and can't track ourselves. And I have a friend and colleague, Marcus Harrison Green, when talking about being in relationship with people who have caused a lot of harm or are really struggling with addiction in particular, he says that he thinks about keeping the porch light on. Mm-hmm. So that's like, we're not actively trying to repair this or fix this. You know, we're not in pursuit of this, but I am remaining, open to the possibility that it could happen somewhere down the line. And that in and of itself is a kind of spiritual work for the community and for yourself.
Because it's still emotional labor to hold that light open and on, because it's still using electricity. It's still...
That's right.
So it's not easy for a lot of people either.
And I think it's also like a service that you can provide yourself and others if you want to. I don't think you have to. This goes back to like, this is all a choice. And, as an anarchist, you get to live your values however that feels right to you. But one of the ways that I try to combat cancel culture is that idea that I believe in people's ability to change, in my own ability to change, in like the stories taking a long time to get written and us not being able to see the end, but that they are ultimately like the stories that we're supposed to live, and that's like one way I think to combat cancel culture, that these are not bad people. It's not like I can never be in community or a room with them again. It's just like, I don't know how we get there, but I hold out hope that we do.
Yeah. Especially with the fact that like, just because you say something or write a sentence doesn't mean that it can't be revised or edited or changed.
Yeah.
It's not always set in stone.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and maybe that there actually are no bad people. They're just
No.
people that need our help or our care.
I don't know about that.
Would anybody want to say Epstein Files or no, just me?
Wow.
What?
Rude.
What?
Rude?
I made an open, compassionate point, and you were like,
I think-
what about
so, like-
Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm like, I'm just not, that's like, sorry.
But I also worry about, like, if we
Where
say
I'm at.
there's no bad people, that we're giving this, like, excuse to people who are bad to just be like, well, you're right. I'm not bad. I'm just a billionaire. Like,
That's right. I mean, if you are just pathologically not accountable for fucking anything
Right. Yeah. Well, I
anytime.
would say there are no bad people. There are just people who need to be held accountable.
I think there's bad people.
I'm like, I really want to.
So, but
Can the accountability be a guillotine? Is that okay?
well, I just feel like if they're like, where do you stop then? Like, if you're willing to just admit that there are bad people, then how do you
I don't actually want to kill
identify
anybody, I swear.
what, like who is worth it to be in community with, right? Are you, like, to me, the definition of community might be that you are willing, like a group of people where you are willing to push through the fact that you really don't like this other person who's in that community because all of the other people that you do like care about that person, right? Like,
Sure.
nobody's in a community where they like everybody. That's not a fucking community. It's like the definition for me is the tension and like the work that it takes to like actually like make it function.
I agree. I think, though, that you can still have a community and still have bad people who are not a part of the community and can just go fuck off. Like, I don't give a shit what they do. Like, because think about the fact that even in the 60s or 50s, like, if I looked at Sarah and then I get killed because you thought that I was trying to, like, date her, you're not a bad person. You just are protecting your wife, right?
But like, what was the thing that,
It doesn't matter. There's no reason. You don't even need an excuse for somebody to die.
But how did we get from there to where we are now? Like, not that it's perfectly better, but there has been, like, you're signaling that there's some sort of transition. And my opinion is that that transition was not identifying who the bad people were and getting rid of them somehow. It was bringing those people who had, the me in this scenario that you've laid out, bringing me along to not be a fucking racist, right? I'm not a racist person. I have racist ideas, which is not necessarily your responsibility, but
I think,
it's
though,
the community's responsibility.
that, like, the transition from here is that you're not killing us as publicly, but we are still doing things that are actively harming and destroying Black communities and hurting them. And so, like, to me, saying there aren't bad people is hard because it's like the existence of the world is perpetually bad for a people.
Yeah.
I think that this gets into systems. I need to be accountable for having derailed us a little bit with the Epstein Files comment. I as soon as I said that, I was like, that was a fuck up.
okay.
I shouldn't have done that.
It was cold-blooded. You know what? The Epstein Island was a community.
I fucking God,
That's
no,
crazy.
No,
Not just
That's
one you want to be in.
No,
Maybe you should just censor yourself.
No. What I wanted to say is we've abstracted this to a point that it's like not what we're most likely experiencing in our communities when you're talking about like pathologically murderous systems like Epstein or the fascists or ICE, right? But I do think that it is worth identifying that like there are systems that are murderous, pathological, they are psychotic, and they are bad. And people have choices to opt into and out of those systems. And I totally appreciate what you're saying, Alex, about like, well, we need to create the conditions for them to make the right choice. And also, to your point, Ramsey, I have a higher expectation for people than that. And that like when faced with the choice to be exploitive and abusive and murderous, that you don't fucking choose that.
Right.
And like, I think that's a fair standard to have for people without having to soften it.
Yeah, the choice to participate in the system or not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I will also presence that as the white man in the room saying there are no bad people. You have the most privilege to say that, right?
Yeah.
So like that's where you can kind of like point that out as just like,
yes, fair.
there are no bad people because you're already at the top.
Right. And we can talk about like consequences and values and morality, and those things can be real without buying into a carceral system that actually only ends up hurting the same vulnerable people over and over again. So I think making that distinction is important too.
Yeah. So
Figured it out. Cool.
we solved it. Solved racism.
Yeah, we did it. Pizza.
I didn't even know we were going to do that today.
Listen, Black History Month, anything's possible.
Anything's
Anything's possible with racism.
and pizza.
And pizza.
I don't know how this turned into me advocating for pedophilia and racism, but
I saw you going there, and I was like, he's
know
gonna
what?
go.
He's
He's
doing-
gonna go
you
there. I
guys
was like,
brought me
he's
there.
gonna go
It's
there.
okay.
I was trying to just
There's
create
no bad
some
people on
test
Epstein's Island.
cases. I didn't say that.
You said it's a community, and that community is shared trauma.
Shared trauma. Yeah. Okay. I loved this conversation. I appreciated where it went, and I think in a way it speaks to why people are in need of community and can be shy of it. Because like, look how messy that just got.
It was very messy.
Right? And that's like difficult and hard, and now everybody feels like a little bit cringe and vulnerable and like, oh boy.
But I know you guys aren't going to cancel me because you said
I will cancel you just a portion, but I still care about
Just a portion of you. But
portion
you're really tall, so there's a
Yeah.
lot of you, you know, left.
But I mean, I'm happy to be in the community with both of you guys, and like I really love being a part of the podcast here, and I feel like it's important to have different voices, and I appreciate that you guys platform the voices that have been here. So
Thank you, Ramsey, and thanks for being such an important part of it. And please come back, because we had like 4 ideas for what we were going to talk about today, and this is just one of them.
I'm happy to plan it.
Next February. No, just kidding. Sorry, it was a callback.
Yeah, it's a callback.
It's a callback. It's part of a joke anatomy humor.
It was last February that you were on, right? Because
No, it was January. Martin Luther King Day.
okay.
You guys love doing it on Black things. So
yeah.
Okay, Juneteenth then. I'm stopping
That's
now. I'm
crazy.
stopping. Thanks, Ramsey.
Thank you, Ramsey, and thank you for listening to Mistakes Were Made. You can find us on Instagram at MistakesCast and on email at MistakesCast. Send us your feedback and love and comments, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.